Zedekiah's cave. I have about half an hour, and I prepared a whole bunch of screens, so we're going to do it. I have a tendency of speaking quickly, so I'll try not to go too quick. Okay? I think Solomon's Quarry, Zedekiah's cave is really a place of mysteries, secrets, legends, and fears. Where is it? We'll try and cover everything. Where is it? What is it? Why did they quarry the stone there? When did they quarry the stone for the caves? Where were the stones? When were the stones when would they quarry the stones? What were they used for? What stories and secrets does it inspire and hide? The Marat Zedekiah, the caves are at the northern part of the city. That's the sign at the entrance. The northern part of the city, the old city. And it's right around here. This is where the Damascus Gate is, and the caves are right over here to the right. Right over to here, the right. This is the Damascus Cave. That's Jaffa Gate. Obviously this is the Temple Mount. Okay? And as you walk in, you walk into the cave and you walk down a whole bunch of steps. Your change of climate, you actually feel the difference. You're going from outside with the light of the day, you're going down into the darkness of the cave, and all of a sudden the noise outside, which is the main street of the East Jerusalem, all of a sudden all the noise disappears. You don't hear anything, you're quiet, you're into another world. Complete silence. The place is, the cave is enormous. The cave is enormous. It's the width of the cave in some places is more than 100 meters. The depth is more than 10 meters of stone is above the cave. In other words, the amount of stone above the cave is about 500,000 tons. The height of the cave, some places, is more than 15 meters high. It reaches from around the Damascus Gate all the way down onto the Via Dolorosa, about 200 meters from the entrance. It's 220 meters from the entrance. Reach down into the Via Dolorosa. You have to imagine, if you go into the old city, walk into the Damascus Gate, you walk on the Guy Street, and you reach the Via Dolorosa. You're almost at the beginning of the Temple Mount. Almost at the beginning of the Temple Mount. Underneath, they're underground. Total size is 9 dunam. The type of stone that's there is limestone malachi stone, which is easy to quarry, hardens when it gets outdoors. We're going to talk about that a little later. The amount of stone that was removed, Professor Gabi Barkey estimated that it was about 350 cubic meters that were taken out from the area. You have to remember where we are. We're in the northern, go back to this picture, we're in the northern part of the city. The wall, the old city wall, which is over here, is actually built on rock. Not like in the side, in the Jaffa Gate side, where you could actually see that they built it and they dug, it's sitting right on the ground. Here, the wall is sitting on the rock. And the theory is that most people, there's an ancient moat that went in the north of the city in this area. And the Damascus Gate and the cave is actually, you go inside the rock, you go down into the cave. The cave, they believe that it was originally a karstic cave, in other words, a natural cave from rain going against limestone. It dug the hole, and then it was expanded. The cave was not always open. It was believed that the cave was sealed when the Turks built the old city wall at the beginning of the 16th century. They feared that the cave would be utilized by enemies to dig under the wall, undermine the wall, and conquer the city. Remember that this is the north side of the city, which is the most vulnerable. There's no city protected from the north. There is on the east. In the east, we have the Kidron Valley. The south, we have Gate Ben Hinnom. In the west, we have the entrance to Jaffa Gate. You all stand at the Jaffa Gate. You notice that it goes down in a long way. I want you to remember also that when the rebels revolting against the Romans, the third wall was built. Josephus talks about a third wall. We're going to see a picture of that in a little while. The third wall, they built it not where the Damascus Gate was. They built it further to the north because the height is much higher over there. And the concept, the greatest fear in the city was that from the north, you would have enemies coming to Jerusalem. Jeremiah says, from the north, you'll have trouble, because the north, you have valleys surrounding the city, but in the north, you don't. So that area, if you can imagine that when the Ottomans, when Suleiman the Great built the walls in the 1500s, 1530s, he actually closed the gate, closed the cave which existed, because he was afraid someone's going to go under the wall. In the middle of between 1948 and another same concept was between 48 and 1967, the cave was closed as well, because the Jordanians were afraid that the Israelis, that we would put mines inside the cave, and in that way we would conquer, we'd be able to reconquer the old city, the old city. So they did that. In the middle of the 19th century, in around 1850s. There's a story of a man walking a dog who was, you have to remember, during the 1850s, the gates were closed. The gates were closed at night, and he was walking his dog outside, and all of a sudden, it must have been a rainy day, and the dog ran away, and they couldn't find the dog, and they were calling the dog, and the dog just disappeared and went into the cave. And then they decided they wanted to come back and explore the cave. So what they did was they dressed up as Arabs. They came back with his children, with his sons, and they came back as Arabs. And they waited until the gates were closed, and then they snuck into the cave. The person they're talking about is Barclay. And in his journal, City of the Gay King, he talks about probing into the extremity of the cave. Now, it's fascinating to note that the two dates given for this, one date talks about 1852, and another one talks about 1854. In the City of the Great King, he talks about, James Barclay's journal, he talks about finding the cave, going back, that someone else had found it a year before and told him the story, and he came back. But he came back at night. We came of deep and precipitous pit in which we received the salutary warning of caution from the dead, the human skeleton, supposed to be that of a person who, not being sufficiently supplied with light, must have fallen down, and the skeleton was not alone inside. They found bats hanging from the ceilings in groups of 50 to 150, which he wrote flew away at our approach for some time, continued to flit and swing around and around our heads. Zedekiah's cave has been, so that's the story. The 1850s, they started exploring it. Later on, we're going to talk about Clement Ganot in 1870s found a picture on the wall. And Charles Warren was noted for also going into the cave, mapping out the cave. He was a Mason, and they had their conventions, the Masons' conventions. The Masons are people of secrets and secret codes and everything. But I want to come to right now to an archaeological dig was done between 2000 and 2002 by Yechiel Zellinger, who was actually assigned to work for a group that thought they could find the Ark of the Covenant inside the Zedekiah cave, because it's so deep and it goes underneath. We'll talk about the legend of where they hid the Ark of the Covenant, that they dug in a group from evangelists from the States. Wyatt was the leader of it. But it's fascinating to see what he wrote. After two sessions, he writes the 2007, this was published by the archaeologist. Area C talks about one area where they found ceramic founds at the bottom, including potsherds from the Roman and Byzantine period, and a few fragments from the Iron Age. Iron Age, we're talking back to First Temple period. Area D talks about the winged cherub, which we're going to see in a moment, which Clement Ganot found in 1874 in the 19th century. And he also found a single bowl from the Iron Age. In another area next to the entrance. Now, you have to understand, when you walk into the entrance, you're walking down through accumulated dirt. In other words, that's not where the quarry starts. Quarry starts further in. And I forgot to add one other thing. We'll talk about it again later. The Damascus Gate from the Roman period. As you walk into the Damascus Gate, you look down below you, about 8 to 10 meters below you. That's the gate that existed 2,000 years ago. So that's going to be important in the continuation of our talk. He found Zellinger in Area E. He found several holes which were hewn, which were dug through the upper part of the aqueduct, the most ancient. Now, when you think about that, holes, that could be the way that they quarried the stones, that they brought them out of the cave. Because we're going to look at the cave in a moment. We're going to look at what you see inside the cave. And the real question is, for the amount of stone that was taken out of it, and you understand, you walk down a whole bunch of staircases, and you walk down about 5 minutes of walking down, they had to take the stone out. So maybe the ancient artifacts were found in probe below the floor, dating to the beginning of the 1st century BCE. This is probably the area where the quarried stones were loaded and brought outside the cave after lifting them with ropes that passed through the holes. So he's giving us an answer how they would take the stone out. We're going to talk about the questions about the stones in what they were used for in a little moment. Okay. Clement Ganot, this is a picture of the drawing that existed on the wall, and he wrote about it. This is when I talk about the picture is like a cherub, like a Kruvim, which would be in the temple, which was on the ark. But these are cherubs, which would be like the Assyrian period. The Assyrian period would be the first temple period. We're talking about 2,700 years ago. And he said that it's 35 by 25 centimeters. It's in England. They chiseled it off the wall. They moved it to England. It's either Okay, it's in England. And Clarenko says like this casual artist was not a master of his craft, but he was sincere, and he had attempted to reproduce after fashion. He claimed that the carving, similar to Syrian cherubs, was from the First Temple period. Professor Gabi Barkai, in an article written in Ariel 23, if I remember the number, says it's not from the First Temple period, it's from the Second Temple period. But this is all just starting to give us a feeling when the cave was in use. The cave was in use if the drawing was on the wall. So Clement Garneau would say perhaps it's from the First Temple period, and Gabi Barkai would say the Second Temple period. Now we're just going to get some pictures telling us what it looked like, what it looks like now. This is a picture that I took as it came in. Then you also see on your right over here, you can see they left pillars to support above them. This is a picture of the western wall, and with the most stones protested in there, the same geological makeup as the stones from the cave, and they're downhill. And one of the large questions is, were the stones in the western wall, were they caved? Did they come from the Zedekiah, the Zedekiah cave? There's another chiseling the stone. You can clearly see how they're chiseling. There's another one showing how they're chiseling the stone. Okay, were the stones quarried from the cave? The stone is special. It's easy to chisel when moist, and when it dries, it becomes hard. The cave, when closed, is naturally wet and moist, and then the stones are easy to quarry. And then when it's taken outside, it becomes hard. It's special stone is called malachite. There was a conference in March 2007 organized by Mitima Letiulin, and it was all about Zedekiah's cave. And Zev Levy, a senior geologist who was already retired, he said the special qualities of the caves and the stone of the caves and the position of it being higher than the temple made it clear to him that the stones, quarrying the stones, were actually used in the renovation of the temple by Herod. He also stated he was questioning the quay. How did they move the stones? Because leaving the stones there, how could you take the stones? You'd have to schlep them up staircase and go down and walk around. He said probably there was another entrance straight onto the Cardo Street, and then they could go down the Guy Street and then facilitate moving the stones. In other words, if we go back to our map, he says that there was a street, if they went straight, they could go straight down this street and bring the stones there. And the difference in height, I'll show you to later on, difference in height is consistent. It's about 30 meters lower, and it would be easy for them to move the stone. To the contrary, though, he said also, Zev Levy said that it's very important that in those days the quarry was closed. You could actually work. The importance of the quarry being in a cave is that you could work during the 24 hours a day. You could work in the sun. You could work in the daytime because it's cold. And it was also very moist. And when it's moist, the stone is very soft. And you could probably, in his mind, you could actually quarry the stones without metal, which is fascinating because they say that the altar, you could not use metal to quarry the stones for the altar, because the altar metal shortens lives and the altar was there to lengthen lives. Same conference, a doctor called Davi Sasson, who's an expert in quarrying materials, said he doesn't believe the stones in the Western walls were quarried in the cave. He's an expert in quarrying, and he compared the quarry there to a quarry that was found in Ramat Shlomo, and he says the quarrying methods in the cave, they still appear in the cave, and that does not be appropriate to take the stones down to the western wall. He doesn't date the quarrying, saying that it could be from the first temple or from the second temple. The quarrying methods have not changed for 3,000 years. He feels that the giant stones could not have come from the cave. Rather, the stones that were quarried in this cave were used as building materials. Now, when you think about what Avi Zellinger said too, when he's talking about his holes on the top, right up here, where was it again? I lost it right over here. To the perforated holes, he said that would fit for building materials when you think about it, and not for the large stones. Now let's keep going. Now again, this is a picture just telling us the concept of if the cave is right over here. This is with heights. You can actually see you could go straight down like this and bring the stones downhill to bring them to the temple. Josephus, now we're going to go into where we have writings about the cave, perhaps. Josephus in the Jewish War describes his Jerusalem. He talks about the third wall. The third wall was built originally by Agrippus in the 40s, in other words. But he didn't finish it, and then they finished it in the Great Revolt. And he writes that he writes about the third wall, and then he talks about the caves, about the burial cave of Helena the king, and then extended further to great length to pass by the sepulchre of caravans of the kings. And people say that that's perhaps was referring to Zedekiah's cave. This is the third wall. This is where the quarries are. This is where Damascus Gate is. And again, it's going downhill like that. Okay. And now we're going to go quickly because we only have about 15 minutes. We could probably do this. Legends about the cave. Oh, in the Gemara, in the Talmud, it talks about something else. It talks about the cave of Zedekiah, and it's this question. This is an Eruvin, and they're talking about when do you need. I gotta get so you can see me. What is the size of the cave, and do you need an eruv, 2,000 meters? And they say like the cave of Zedekiah, that the cave of Zedekiah is large, 2,000 meters, but that it's desolate. There's no one living in there. There's no one living there. Now we're going to talk about the legends about the cave. It's really fascinating that there's so many legends about the cave. When you think about it, I tried to relate it to something else. In the old city, in the Kidron Valley, you have Zechariah's tomb, and you have Yad Avshalom. You have two things that are related to Zechariah, who was one of the last prophets, let's say 2,500 years ago, and Avshalom's tomb, which would go back 3,000 years. And the question is, are those really Avshalom's tombs and Zechariah's tombs? And it's clear that they were not. It's just that it seems like when we talk about it in tours, we say that those tombs were. What happened was they're from the Second Temple period, the end of the Second Temple period, and 1,000 years later, people coming and they were trying to relate to what they see to the Bible. They're trying to, just like if you talk about the original archaeologists, they were always coming to the Holy Land, coming to Israel, and they're trying to relate everything they find to the Bible. So there are legends about the cave. The first legend is that Zedekiah attempted to escape from Jerusalem by using a cave which reached Jericho, or that the Ark of the Covenant is in the cave. There's an Arab legend that says that Korah, when he was swallowed up, it happened in the cave. And the third one is that the stones for Solomon's table came from this cave. So first one we're talking about is the quarry. In Kings 1, they talk about Solomon's quarry. And it's interesting to note that right over here in the 29th verse over here, this is Kings 1, chapter 5, it talks about 70,000 bore who carried the stones, and 80,000 were working in the mountains. I don't know if that fits this area or not. And they write like this. I'm sorry. And it goes like this. It says that they would prepare the stones outside the Temple Mount using tools and bring them inside already cut, so no iron tools would be used inside the temple itself. That's what it talks about and it talks about the shamir, a special sort of worm that would do the cutting, so it would not be using metal. But that's the base of that legend. Is it true? Well, we talked about the archaeologists. They said that perhaps it's First Temple period, perhaps it's not. And how did they move the stones? Well, Kavi Bar Kaim said it's clearly only Second Temple period. Only Clement Ganot from the 1870s said perhaps it's First Temple period. The real story we're talking about is the story of Zedekiah. Zedekiah was the last king in Judah. And what happened was he had made a treaty with the Babylonians, and then he changed his mind. Jeremiah chapter 52 talks about it. And it says that what happened was the city was broken into, and all the men of the war fled and merged the city by way of the gate between the two walls. And they surrounded the city, and they went and they chased him all the way down to Jericho. And then when they caught him, they brought him in front of the king, and the king slaughtered his children in front of his eyes, and he blinded him. And in the next, he talks about like this. And in Rashi talking about it in the 11th century, he said there was a cave extending from Zedekiah's house to the plains of Jericho, and he went through the cave. And what did God do? He wanted him to be caught. He brought before the army a deer, which is walking before them on the roof of the cave, and they started chasing the deer. And when he came out of the cave in the plains of Jericho, they saw him and they caught him. That's what he says. Okay, and the same thing shows up in Yechezkel, where we just lost it. Same thing shows up. The same concept. King went from his house. Okay. Interesting to note that there's actually a natural spring in the depths of the cave. And they call it Zedekiah's tears. It doesn't flows, but it just drips and drips and drips. And some people will say that the concept is there. So what happened was that Zedekiah, if you can imagine, Zedekiah tried to escape. He was caught. His children were killed in front of his eyes. And then he was blinded. And maybe that's why the spring just drips like tears. It's interesting, Rav Yosef Schwartz in his book, Tvuta Aretz, which was written 150 years ago, says the King's Kevin mentioned that, we mentioned by Josephus, and the Zedekiah cave is not our cave. He says that the King's cave refers to the King's tomb, the King's tombs, which exists near the old American embassy near the third wall. Okay, Rav Luntz, who published the book, found it noted in a footnote that Rav Schwartz was referring to two caves, the Zedekiah cave and the Helena burial cave. In other words, the two caves. He wrote that it's clear that the legend of Zedekiah escaped in the cave is untrue. As mentioned in Kaftor Afar, there's no basis to the tradition, only because the residents in Jerusalem were afraid to go to the end of the cave. They thought it reached Jericho. But its length is only 1,000 feet, and I've gone its length. Interesting to note, he says that he went to its length. He clearly, I've spoken to archaeologists and I've spoken to a geologist, and he says that Zellinger says that he didn't reach the end of the cave. And my neighbor, Dr. Zevi Minster, who was a geologist, said they haven't reached the end of the cave. So who knows? Maybe it does reach Jericho, but we don't believe it reaches Jericho. The other idea, the hiding of the Ark on the Temple Mount, it goes back to, refers to in Harayat, in the Talmud, it says that they hid in Mishkan Shkalim, it talks about it once. He says that there's a whole question where they flew the Ark. Is the Ark in Ethiopia, Indiana Jones, or like Mr. White, Pastor White, who thinks that he found it in the area? But the tradition we have is that it was hidden. And what happened was that when Solomon prepared the temple, he actually prepared a place to hide the Ark of the Covenant, because he knew that at some point in the future the first temple would be destroyed and that they would steal the Ark of the Covenant. And that's what he did, was he prepared a place, the tunnels underneath. We talk about, in the Western Wall tunnels, we talk about Rav Getz, who in 1981, he was a Kabbalist, and he believed that he could find the Ark of the Covenant, and he actually started digging where the Western Wall is, next to Warren's Gate, and he was stopped. He thought he would find it, but he didn't have to find it. He was stopped. He never had the opportunity. His plan was to go in, find the tunnels, and go through the tunnels and tunnels and tunnels underneath the Temple Mount until he would reach the place where the Ark was hidden. And where was it? There's an argument between the rabbis. Okay, and they say that it's in the place it was hidden was in the wooden court, which is the ladies' court. And it once happened that a priest who was busy noticed the floor was different from the others. And he went and told it to his friend, but by the time before he could finish, he died. Now the place, the chamber of the wood is right over here. In other words, this is the eastern side of the Temple Mount. Court of the women, the chamber of the wood is right over here. It's interesting to note, right around here, if you go back to that map that we had before, go back to this map. So the women's court is right over here. It's interesting to note that if you go into the Temple Mount, they actually have wooden beams that from the Second Temple period, or maybe the First Temple period, and they're sitting right over here. There's an argument between the Waqf, and the Archaeological Institute. They want to take the beams out. The beams, some of them have been dated, going back to the First Temple period. And it's interesting to note they're found just by chance. They're found right next to where the court once was, and maybe that is where the Ark of the Covenant is. Okay, maybe. We can't tell. Another legend is that Korach and his people were killed. In other words, when they were swallowed up in the earth, they were swallowed up into the earth. They were swallowed up into the earth in the cave. Writing in the 10th century, there is in Jerusalem a huge cavern. And they said perhaps that's where Korach's people were. There's another story. There's a story of demons in the caves in a book, Our Jerusalem. She tells about a group that came to Israel, and they were I don't know, some were demons, and they hid in the Solomon's quarries to wait until spirits moved us out, and they had rituals with fires and other things. You can understand the fear of the people. This is some pictures, okay, and that's one of those beams. There's another last story about the 1921, early 20th century. They actually quarried the stones in the cave to build the Jerusalem clock tower. There were 7 clock towers built, and they were built in honor of in Israel, in Palestine, and they were there for the 25th anniversary of Sultan Abdul Hamid, and he built a very ornate. I can understand the English who took it down. That's what it looked like. Doesn't look nice like the one in Jaffa. Doesn't have this porch and doesn't have all this ornate sort of stuff. Okay, and it was built of limestone from the nearby Zedekiah caves. It's 13 feet tall, etc., etc. And there were 7 clocks like that in Sfat, Akko, Haifa, Nazareth, Nablus, Jerusalem, and Jaffa. 1922, the British said it doesn't fit with that's there, and they eliminated all the stores and everything that was in the area. We're getting close to the end, and I want to read to you. Oh, also after that, a man called the Katinka, also cave stones from there later on. I want to read to you a beautiful poem written by, written by Yudah Amichai. And he talks about, this is my translation. He writes like this: Jerusalem underground, holes and graves, caves and emptiness, like puff pillows for a calm rest, above a harsh history, or like echo boxes resonating of violins and drums, of guitars and ouds, so that we that live in the city may be heard day by day, our hands and legs dancing like musicians. Here in the depths of the big cave continues the perpetual game of hide and seek, man from his God and God from man. Here he puts his head against the wall and hides his face and counts and hides, sometimes never to be found, to be lost in the darkness. Here was swallowed Korach and his followers, their proud voices were heard in a silent argument between beliefs. Here Solomon quarried the stones from the depths, like prayers from the depths. Here the last king ran away from his fate to his fate, and his name remains as an echo, Zedekiah's cave. And my small son calls it Pikpikiau's cave. And I, on days of the hot shrav, when it's hot in the summer, call it my last hope. The guard at the entrance sits, half in the sun, half in darkness. At 5 p.m. is closing time. At nightfall, all that remains inside, stairs and water dripping, its real soul. Nowadays, we're almost finished. Nowadays, in the cave, they have concerts. In other words, you walk down, you get there, there's busing bringing you to the area. This is a picture I took in a concert we were at. And there are about 1,000 candles to escort you down the staircase. And you go down and you meet. They put chairs up. You meet in the area where the Masons had their meetings. First time when I prepared a tour of the Zedekiah's cave, I went down to the Zedekiah's cave by myself to prepare the tour. The Zedekiah's cave, when you think about it, the change of the darkness, it's a place of secrets, of different legends are here. And the first time I came into this cave, it was in the winter. It was moist. I told the lady at the entrance, "Excuse me, I just want to prepare a tour for the area." She said, go on in. And I walked in, and it was silence throughout the cave. And as I'm getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the cave, all of a sudden I hear a little bit of noise. And as I reached the bottom of the cave, all of a sudden I realized there were some more secrets in the cave. There was an Arab couple who went into the cave, and they keep the secret of their meeting from the outer world. It's been my pleasure. Tuesday night, there's going to be another tour given to you by, where did I write it down? I wrote it down. Yehuda Singer will be talking about Galil, Galil, the Galil of the Bible at 8 p.m. It's been my pleasure. This is part of Reshit. First one of a bunch of lectures. I'll be back in 2 weeks talking about the broad wall. It's been my pleasure. Thank you. Questions? Don't ask questions, anybody. You can if you want. I don't know if I'll find them. Okay. Get back to Zoom. You have any questions? Where do you go? Get it out of here. Oh, chats. Questions and answers? Yeah. I don't know. Probably Packer is here. You have to let. I don't know. 40 participants. That's really great. Any chats? Anything else? It's in my honor and pleasure. Have a good evening. Yeah, 2. I don't know. What are you raising your hand? Someone's raising their hand. I don't see it. Okay. Pleasure. Bye. Oh, what did it say over there to all the participants? I missed that. I don't know how to get the chats here. Sorry, before the end. Okay. Pleasure. Good evening. The Korach incident was in the Midbar. How could it have happened in the cave? Excellent question. Legends. Legends. We're talking about legends. We're talking about the same concept. Could have Zedekiah have escaped in the cave? I doubt it. I didn't really talk about it, but in the movie, I have to add one other thing. I'm going to go back to this. Could Zedekiah, when you think about it, I'm going to show you the picture again of the map. Here, this is the map, okay? And if we get other questions, I'm going to move this to the side. Now, if Zedekiah was living here, they actually says that he went through the wall. The way he would have escaped, he probably would have escaped down here and then taken the Kidron Valley, which goes down to the Dead Sea. It doesn't make sense for him to be going up to here and escaping down like that. It makes much more sense for him to going out like this and going down. So that's number one. Zedekiah's cave is probably just a legend, just as I was talking about. The concept of did they usually actually use the stones in the First Temple period? The archaeologists say that's not likely. Korach, obviously not. And the Ark of the Covenant would, well, I don't know. If the cave actually reaches right around here, and this is where the wood court is. That's pretty close, but who knows? Could they have found it? I don't know. Okay, anything else? Did I answer that? Is that okay, Barry? Okay. I answered it. No.